11 old Hollywood stars with disturbing secret collections. Behind the glamorous facades of Hollywood's golden age stars lurked collections so bizarre and disturbing that studios spent fortunes keeping them hidden from the public. These weren't the carefully curated treasures you'd expect from the rich and famous. They were dark, often disturbing accumulations that revealed the troubled minds behind cinema's most beloved faces. I've uncovered 11 shocking, strange, and sometimes heartbreaking collections that classic Hollywood stars kept secret their entire lives. From lovers' hair preserved in personal shrines to medical oddities that would make modern collectors shudder, these private obsessions expose the psychological torment many stars endured while maintaining perfect public images. And number 4's collection was so troubling that after his tragic death, friends broke into his apartment to remove it before police arrived, ensuring his darkest secret would stay buried forever. But what drove these seemingly perfect stars to such disturbing collecting behaviors? Was it the isolation of fame, unprocessed trauma, or something inherently broken in the studio system that treated humans like commodities? Stay with me, because these collections offer rare glimpses into the private torments of people trapped in gilded cages of celebrity. By the end of this video, you'll understand why the most beautiful faces on screen often mask the most troubled souls in Hollywood, and how their secret collections served as both symptom and coping mechanism for the psychological price of stardom. Number 1. Tallulah Bankhead, the secret shrine of celebrity conquests. I'm as pure as the driven slush. Tallulah Bankhead was Broadway and Hollywood's original wild child, famous for her husky voice, sexual liberation, and shocking behavior decades before such freedom was acceptable for women. Behind her libertine public image, however, lay a collecting habit that revealed a far more complex emotional landscape. According to close friends and household staff who spoke after her death, Bankhead maintained what she called her memory drawer, a collection of intimate mementos from her countless lovers. Unlike conventional keepsakes, Bankhead allegedly collected literal pieces of her partners: locks of hair, cigarette butts with lipstick traces, used handkerchiefs, and even nail clippings. Walter Winchell, the notorious gossip columnist, alluded to this collection in a 1932 column, writing, "Certain Broadway gentlemen might be shocked to learn which parts of their anatomy Miss B has preserved for posterity." The column was quickly retracted after legal threats, but rumors of Bankhead's love mementos persisted throughout her career. Bankhead's longtime maid, Evelyn Hunt, told biographers that the collection was meticulously organized in velvet-lined boxes with handwritten cards identifying each person and the date of their encounter. Some boxes contained just a cigarette butt or theater ticket, Hunt recalled. Others held more intimate items I was instructed never to touch without gloves. What makes this collection particularly poignant is how it contrasted with Bankhead's carefully cultivated image of casual detachment. The woman who famously declared, "I'm a one-night stand kind of girl," was privately preserving physical reminders of these supposedly meaningless encounters, suggesting a depth of sentiment she never publicly acknowledged. According to those who knew her well, Bankhead would sometimes spend hours alone with her collection, particularly during periods of depression or after professional setbacks. Her friend and occasional lover, Patsy Kelly, claimed to have once found Bankhead at 3 a.m. intoxicated and arranging these mementos on her bedroom floor in elaborate patterns, while talking to them as if they were people. The collection allegedly included items from some of the most famous names in entertainment and politics, including Marlene Dietrich, Greta Garbo, and allegedly Winston Churchill, though the latter claim has been strongly disputed. After Bankhead's death in 1968, her sister Eugenia reportedly discovered the collection and, horrified by its contents and implications, destroyed it immediately, erasing this physical evidence of Tallulah's complex emotional life and ensuring the full truth would never be known. Number 2. Howard Hughes, when a Hollywood titan became a prisoner of his collections. I'm not a paranoid, deranged millionaire. I'm a billionaire. Howard Hughes began his Hollywood career as a dashing producer, aviator, and ladies' man who dated stars like Katharine Hepburn and Ava Gardner. By the 1950s, however, his deteriorating mental health transformed him into cinema's most notorious hoarder, a recluse surrounded by disturbing collections that reflected his declining psychological state. Hughes's most infamous collection, documented by his medical staff and later confirmed in biographical accounts, consisted of his own bodily waste stored in carefully labeled jars. According to staff who cared for him in his final decades, Hughes kept hundreds of jars of urine stacked in his sealed hotel rooms, organizing them chronologically and sometimes examining them for hours convinced they contained critical information about his health that doctors were concealing from him. This wasn't his only disturbing collection. As his obsessive-compulsive disorder worsened, Hughes began hoarding tissues and paper products he had touched. Former employees described rooms filled with stacks of used Kleenex that Hughes refused to discard, believing they contained germs that needed to be quarantined rather than released into the environment. Perhaps most bizarrely, Hughes collected newspapers, not for their content, but as physical barriers. He would instruct staff to place newspapers on every surface he might touch, creating layers that sometimes grew feet thick as new papers were added daily without the old ones being removed. These newspaper nests eventually made parts of his living spaces inaccessible. The psychological origins of Hughes's hoarding emerged from his progressive paranoia and germophobia. According to biographer Donald Bartlett, Hughes believed he was constantly under surveillance, and that his bodily waste contained information that could be used against him if discovered. The newspapers created both physical barriers between himself and contamination, while also allowing him to track time in his increasingly isolated existence. During his final years, spent primarily in the penthouse of the Desert Inn in Las Vegas, Hughes's collections became so extreme that staff could only enter his room in specific sequences, navigating narrow pathways between accumulated waste, papers, and containers. According to his personal physician, the billionaire often lived in a single corner of his suite, surrounded by his disturbing collections, watching old movies on repeat. The tragedy of Hughes's collecting lies in its progression, from a brilliant, ambitious filmmaker who produced classics like Hell's Angels and The Outlaw, to a man imprisoned by his own waste products and pathological inability to discard anything that had touched his body. When he died in 1976 at age 70, Hughes was virtually unrecognizable, emaciated, with long hair and fingernails, surrounded by the physical manifestations of his mental illness. What makes Hughes's case unique among Hollywood collectors is the complete documentation of his decline through medical records, staff testimony, and FBI files. His hoarding wasn't rumor or exaggeration, but thoroughly verified evidence of how untreated mental illness transformed one of Hollywood's most glamorous figures into a cautionary tale of wealth without health. Number 3. Lupe Velez, the Mexican Spitfire's dark spiritual collection. I live by a man's code, designed to fit a man's world, yet at the same time I never forget that a woman's first job is to choose the right shade of lipstick. Lupe Velez blazed across Hollywood screens in the 1930s as the Mexican Spitfire, bringing fiery Latin passion to American cinema decades before diversity was valued. Behind her vivacious public image, however, Velez reportedly maintained a collection that reflected her complex relationship with religion, superstition, and her own tumultuous life. According to biographers and household staff interviewed after her died in 1944, Velez had converted rooms of her Beverly Hills home into what one employee described as part Catholic shrine, part brujeria workshop. This unusual space reportedly housed her growing collection of religious icons, candles, and objects associated with both traditional Catholicism and Mexican folk magic. Velez's collection allegedly began after her traumatic breakup with Gary Cooper and accelerated during her volatile marriage to Johnny Weissmuller, famous for playing Tarzan. According to her longtime housekeeper, Maria Martinez, Velez believed many of these objects had protective powers or could bring vengeance upon those who had wronged her. The collection reportedly included hundreds of saint statues, many modified with personal items belonging to lovers or rivals, specially commissioned votive candles with photographs embedded in the wax, and a shrine containing objects related to her failed relationships, including items allegedly belonging to Gary Cooper. What made this collection particularly unsettling to those who saw it was Velez's systematic approach. According to Martinez, each item was labeled with specific intentions, dates, and outcomes she sought. After particularly painful breakups, Velez would reportedly perform elaborate rituals with these objects, sometimes involving the burning of personal items belonging to former lovers. The psychological complexity of Velez's collecting reflected her position between cultures. Raised in Catholic Mexico but living in secular Hollywood, her collection embodied this duality, mixing traditional religious devotion with practices the Catholic Church would have condemned. As her career and personal life became more troubled, her collecting reportedly intensified. Most disturbing were the alleged death tokens discovered after Velez's suicide. died, small memento mori objects she had collected and arranged on her bedside table before taking an overdose of sleeping pills. These reportedly included a child's prayer book, 3 black candles, and a small wax figure some claimed represented the unborn child whose pregnancy had driven her to suicide. While some details of Velez's collection may have been sensationalized after her tragic death, enough consistent accounts exist from multiple sources to suggest the actress indeed maintained an unusual spiritual collection that reflected her increasing desperation as her career waned and her personal life unraveled. Number 4. Montgomery Clift, documenting his own destruction. The only line that's wrong in Shakespeare is, holding a mirror up to nature. You hold the magnifying glass up to what's left. Montgomery Clift was Hollywood's original beautiful tragic figure, the sensitive actor whose devastating 1956 car accident transformed his face and accelerated his decline into addiction and despair. According to close friends who spoke years after his death, Clift developed a disturbing collecting habit directly related to his accident and subsequent identity crisis. Elizabeth Taylor, his closest friend and the first person to reach him after the crash, later revealed that Clift began obsessively documenting his physical transformation through photographs. What began as medical documentation for his surgeons allegedly evolved into a macabre personal archive that Clift kept hidden from almost everyone. According to Clift's longtime companion Lorenzo James, this collection included before and after photographs of his face, taken from identical angles to document subtle changes, X-rays and medical images from various surgeries, which he would study for hours, medication bottles and surgical implements preserved from each procedure, and newspaper clippings about the accident arranged chronologically. Patricia Bosworth, Clift's biographer, confirmed the existence of this collection through interviews with multiple sources close to the actor. According to Bosworth, Clift kept these items in specially made boxes labeled with dates, creating what one friend described as a meticulous archive of his own destruction. The most disturbing aspect of the collection emerged after Clift began taking private photographs of his face in various stages of deterioration due to alcohol, drugs, and aging. According to James, Clift would sometimes recreate exact poses from his early publicity photographs, creating unsettling comparisons between his youthful beauty and his damaged later appearance. This collecting behavior intensified during periods of depression and substance abuse. Friends reported finding Clift sitting on his bathroom floor, surrounded by these photographs, studying them through a magnifying glass. Actor Kevin McCarthy recalled visiting Clift's apartment and finding him comparing close-up photographs of his eyes before and after the accident, obsessively noting minute differences. After Clift's death in 1966, his brother Brooks discovered this collection and, according to multiple accounts, was so disturbed by its contents that he removed it from Clift's apartment before police arrived. The collection's current whereabouts remain unknown, with some sources claiming Brooks destroyed it entirely, while others suggest portions were preserved by the family but never made public. What makes Clift's collecting particularly heartbreaking is how it reflected his inability to reconcile his dual identities: the breathtakingly beautiful actor of Red River and A Place in the Sun versus the physically and psychologically damaged man he became after the accident. His archive served as a painful testament to the before and after existence that dominated his final years. Number 5. Gloria Swanson, Beauty's Skeleton Collection. I've given my memoirs far more thought than any of my marriages. You can't divorce a book. Gloria Swanson dominated silent films as the epitome of glamour and sophistication, earning unparalleled wealth and fame before talkies transformed Hollywood. After her career faded, Swanson reportedly developed a collecting habit that seemed deliberately designed to contradict the beauty that had defined her public image. According to numerous visitors to her New York apartment from the 1950s onward, Swanson assembled an extensive collection of animal skeletons, taxidermy, and anatomical specimens, creating what one visitor described as a beautiful woman's shrine to decay. This unusual collecting focus allegedly began after Swanson's role in Sunset Boulevard, 1950, where she played Norma Desmond, a faded silent film star living among relics of her past glory. The parallels to her own life apparently triggered an existential crisis that manifested in her attraction to physical remains as art objects. According to her daughter, Michelle Farmer, Swanson's collection grew to include articulated small animal skeletons displayed in lifelike poses, Victorian-era taxidermy under glass domes, antique anatomical models, and medical teaching tools, and preserved butterflies and insects arranged in elaborate patterns. What made this collection particularly noteworthy was Swanson's presentation of these macabre objects. Rather than creating a dark or gothic atmosphere, she displayed them in elegant settings with fine antiques and proper lighting. According to interior designer Billy Baldwin, who visited her apartment, she treated a mouse skeleton with the same reverence another collector might display a Fabergé egg. The psychological aspects of Swanson's collecting emerged in comments she reportedly made to visitors. According to director George Cukor, she once told him while showing a particularly delicate bird skeleton, "Isn't it remarkable? All that beauty, all that movement, reduced to its essential architecture. That's what happens to all of us, even stars." Her collection accelerated after her failed health food business ventures in the 1960s. As financial pressures mounted, Swanson reportedly sold jewelry and furs, but continued acquiring skeletal specimens, suggesting they held greater personal significance than her traditional symbols of wealth and status. Kenneth Anger, in his controversial book Hollywood Babylon, claimed Swanson's collection reflected her morbid fascination with her own mortality and faded beauty. While Anger's work contains many unverified claims, multiple credible sources confirm Swanson's unusual collection existed and grew increasingly important to her with age. In her final years, Swanson reportedly arranged for specific items from her collection to be cremated with her when she died, a wish her family honored when she passed in 1983. The majority of her collection was sold at auction, with pieces occasionally appearing in natural history collections, with provenance tracing back to the silent film star who once embodied Hollywood glamour. Number 6. Anthony Perkins. When Norman Bates Came Home. I have learned that acting is not about beauty. It's about how you feel and communicate that feeling. Anthony Perkins created one of cinema's most unforgettable characters as Norman Bates in Psycho, 1960. According to several biographers and friends who spoke after his death, the role affected Perkins so profoundly that he began collecting items from the film, a habit that reportedly evolved into a disturbing shrine-like assemblage. While filming Psycho, Perkins allegedly began taking small items from the set, initially innocuous souvenirs like a desk pencil or prop newspaper. According to production designer Robert Clatworthy, who spoke to Perkins' biographer, Charles Weinkauf, this behavior escalated as filming progressed, with Perkins pocketing more significant items like a stuffed bird from the motel office and pieces of the infamous shower set. According to John Michael Hayes, who worked with Perkins on later projects, these souvenirs gradually expanded into a dedicated collection that Perkins kept in his Los Angeles home. Hayes claimed to have seen this collection in the 1970s, describing it as Norman's Corner, a section of Perkins' study containing the stuffed crow from the film's parlor scene, a piece of the shower curtain from the murder sequence, Mother's wig stand, though not the wig itself, Norman's record player and selected records, and a knife similar to the murder weapon, though not the actual prop. What made this collection particularly unsettling was how Perkins reportedly related to it. According to his Psycho 2 co-star Meg Tilly, Perkins would sometimes slip into Norman's voice and mannerisms when discussing these items, creating an uncomfortable blurring between actor and character. Robert Loggia, who worked with Perkins on multiple films, later recalled, "Tony had a complex relationship with Norman. He both resented being typecast by the role and felt a strange protective attachment to the character. The collection seemed to be his way of maintaining control over Norman rather than letting Norman control him." The psychological significance of this collection deepened in context of Perkins' complex sexuality and relationship with his domineering real-life mother. Like Norman Bates, Perkins had a complicated maternal relationship and struggled with his identity. The collection allegedly served as both exorcism and embrace of the role that defined and limited his career. After Perkins died from AIDS complications in 1992, his widow Barry Berenson reportedly distributed items from the collection to selected friends and colleagues, considering it too painful to maintain but too significant to simply discard. Director John Waters, a friend of Perkins, claimed to have received one of the stuffed birds, which he displayed in his Baltimore home as a tribute to both Psycho and Perkins himself. While some details of Perkins' collection may have been exaggerated in retellings, Enough consistent accounts exist from credible sources to suggest the actor indeed maintained a significant collection of psychomemorabilia, a physical manifestation of his complex relationship with the character that made him famous but also trapped him professionally. Number 7. Mae West, the doll mistress of Hollywood. I used to be Snow White, but I drifted. Mae West built her career on sexual innuendo and unapologetic feminine power decades before the sexual revolution. Behind her bold public persona, according to several biographers and staff members who worked in her home, West maintained a collection that reflected a more complex reality. Dozens of custom-made dolls that allegedly resembled men from her past. According to Paul Novak, West's companion in her later years, this collection began in the 1930s after a difficult breakup with one of her many lovers. Rather than photographs or conventional mementos, West commissioned a small cloth doll resembling her former paramour from a theatrical costume designer. This single doll eventually grew into a collection that reportedly numbered dozens by the time of her death. According to her longtime housekeeper Louise, West referred to these dolls as her silent gentlemen and kept them arranged on specially built shelves in her bedroom. Each doll was dressed in miniature clothing that supposedly matched outfits worn by the men they represented. Some biographers claim certain dolls contained locks of hair or small personal items belonging to their real-life counterparts, though this detail has been disputed. What made West's doll collection particularly unusual was how she reportedly interacted with it. According to both Novak and Louise, West would regularly speak to the dolls, sometimes carrying on lengthy one-sided conversations, particularly when making major career or personal decisions. This behavior intensified as she aged and became increasingly isolated from Hollywood's changing social scene. The psychological aspects of West's collecting become clearer in context of her carefully constructed public image. As a woman who built her career on controlling men through sexuality and wit, the doll collection reportedly allowed her to literally objectify her former lovers, reducing complex relationships to manageable, unchanging figures that remained permanently under her control. The collection reportedly grew most rapidly during the 1950s and 1960s, when West's film career had essentially ended and she felt increasingly irrelevant in changing Hollywood. During this period, she allegedly commissioned dolls representing not just former lovers, but male studio executives and directors who had shaped her career, creating what her biographer Simon Luvish called a three-dimensional autobiography in miniature. In her final years, as her famous figure changed with age and her public appearances became rare, West reportedly spent increasing time with her doll collection, sometimes dressing them in new outfits or rearranging their positions. According to her nurse, in her final months, West would ask for specific dolls to be placed beside her bed, referring to them by name and sometimes holding them like comfort objects. After West's death in 1980, the collection was quietly divided among her heirs, with most pieces sold to private collectors who specialized in Hollywood memorabilia. While the full extent and nature of West's doll collection remains partly speculative, enough consistent accounts exist to suggest the legendary sex symbol indeed maintained this unusual collection, perhaps as a way of preserving control over the relationships that had defined her life and career. Number 8. Peter Lorre, the horror star's medical curiosities. The Face I Was Born With is a good portrayer of horror. Peter Lorre terrified audiences as the child murderer in M, and as various sinister characters throughout his Hollywood career. According to friends and colleagues who knew him well, Lorre's off-screen collecting habits eerily paralleled his on-screen persona, focusing on antique medical instruments, anatomical models, and forensic photographs that reflected his fascination with the human body's vulnerability. According to Vincent Price, who worked with Lorre on several films and became a close friend, Lorre began collecting antique medical instruments in the 1940s after researching a role as a doctor. What started as professional interest evolved into a comprehensive collection of surgical tools, pharmaceutical vessels, and medical teaching models spanning the 18th to early 20th centuries. Lorre's longtime physician, Dr. Maurice Weinberg, noted that unlike most collectors of medical antiques who focused on aesthetics or historical significance, Lorre was primarily interested in items that illustrated suffering or physical transformation. His collection reportedly emphasized tools related to amputation, trepanation, drilling into the skull, and other invasive procedures that would be considered primitive by modern standards. According to to director Roger Corman, who visited Laurie's home in the early 1960s, one room was dedicated entirely to this collection, with glass-fronted cabinets displaying hundreds of scalpels, bone saws, dental instruments, and bloodletting devices organized chronologically. Corman recalled Lore demonstrating various tools, explaining their purpose and evolution with unsettling enthusiasm and technical knowledge. Perhaps most disturbing was Laurie's reported collection of forensic photographs and medical illustrations. According to Boris Karloff, another friend and colleague, Laurie maintained albums of 19th century medical photographs showing various diseases and deformities, along with early forensic crime scene photography. Karloff claimed Laurie would study these images for hours, occasionally incorporating subtle details from them into his performances. The psychological roots of Laurie's collecting may have stemmed from his own physical challenges. Born with a congenital spine condition that caused chronic pain, Lore developed a morphine addiction that plagued him throughout his adult life. Friends suggested his medical collecting reflected his ambivalent relationship with doctors, simultaneously depending on them for pain management while resenting this dependency. As Laurie's health declined in his final years, his collecting reportedly intensified. According to his third wife, Anne Marie Brenning, he became particularly focused on acquiring 19th century pharmaceutical containers that had held various opiates and pain medications, substances similar to those he had struggled with throughout his life. After Lore's death in 1964, much of his collection was sold through private dealers specializing in medical antiques. Selected pieces occasionally appear at auction, sometimes commanding premium prices due to their famous former owner, creating the ironic situation where instruments once used to alleviate suffering have become commodities valued for their association with cinema's master of portrayed suffering. Number 9. Barbara Payton, Hollywood's fallen star, and her wall of shame. I'm not ashamed of anything I've ever done. I've lived my life my way. Barbara Payton's Hollywood story represents one of the industry's most tragic falls, from promising Warner Brothers contract player and romantic companion of Franchot Tone and George Raft to prostitution and alcoholism within a decade. According to those who knew her during this decline, Payton developed a disturbing collecting habit that seemed to document her own destruction. As her career and personal life unraveled through the 1950s, Payton reportedly began preserving evidence of her downfall, creating what her neighbor in her final years described as a wall of shame, a chronological collage of artifacts from her descent through Hollywood's hierarchies. According to Raymond Straight, Payton's biographer and friend during her final years, this collection included hotel room keys with identifying tags from increasingly less prestigious establishments, reflecting her downward spiral from luxury hotels to roadside motels to flop houses. It also reportedly contained hundreds of letters from former colleagues and lovers, arranged from respectful professional correspondence to increasingly crude propositions as her status diminished. Perhaps most disturbing were the photographs Payton allegedly collected of herself, arranged chronologically to show her transformation from glamorous starlet to haggard alcoholic. According to Straight, Payton would add new photos regularly, creating a visual timeline of her deterioration that she would show to visitors with a mixture of defiance and resignation. John O'Dowd, another biographer who interviewed people who knew Payton in her final years, described additional elements of her collection: unpaid bills and eviction notices framed like achievements, publicity materials from films she was fired from or that were never completed, and court documents from her numerous legal troubles carefully preserved in albums. What makes Payton's collecting particularly heartbreaking is its apparent purpose. Unlike other collectors who preserved achievements or objects of beauty, Payton seemed determined to document her own self-destruction in meticulous detail. According to multiple sources, she would often review this collection while drinking, as if confirming her narrative of inevitable decline. The psychological aspects of this collecting behavior suggest a form of reclaiming control over an out-of-control life. By curating the evidence of her fall, Payton transformed herself from victim to documentarian, the author, rather than simply the subject of her tragic story. In her final months before dying of heart and liver failure at just 39, Payton reportedly became obsessed with organizing this collection, ensuring it told the complete story of her rise and fall. According to her son John Lee, she told him, "When I'm gone, This is all that will be left to explain who I really was. After Peyton's death in 1967, her son destroyed much of this disturbing archive, finding it too painful to preserve. What remains are primarily the accounts of those who witnessed it, testaments to a fallen star's determination to control at least the documentation of her decline when she could no longer control the decline itself. Number 10. Clara Bow, the It Girl's archive of cruelty. All the time the flapper is laughing and dancing, there's a feeling of tragedy underneath. Clara Bow, cinema's original It Girl, became the definitive flapper and sex symbol of the 1920s before a combination of scandals, studio conflicts, and the transition to sound ended her career. According to those close to her in later life, Bow maintained a collection that revealed the psychological damage inflicted by her meteoric rise and fall. Scrapbooks containing every negative article, scandal sheet, and cruel cartoon published about her during her career and beyond. According to Bow's sons and her final caretakers, this disturbing archive began after the 1931 gambling and morals charges that damaged her reputation. Rather than avoiding the negative publicity as most stars would, Bow began methodically collecting and preserving every harsh word written about her, from mainstream newspaper criticisms to the most salacious tabloid fabrications. Bow's friend and fellow actress Adela Rogers St. John's described seeing these scrapbooks in the 1950s, long after Bow had retreated from public life. According to St. John's, they contained hundreds of pages of meticulously arranged clippings, organized chronologically and sometimes annotated in Bow's handwriting with comments like lies, this reporter knew better, or sometimes simply true. What made this collection particularly disturbing was Bow's reported habit of regularly reviewing it. According to her son Robert, Bow would sometimes spend entire days reading through these scrapbooks of cruelty, often becoming increasingly agitated and distressed, yet unable to stop the self-destructive ritual. This behavior typically preceded her psychiatric hospitalizations in later life. The most painful items in Bow's collection were reportedly the cartoon caricatures that mocked her Brooklyn accent and limited education, sources of deep insecurity for a woman who had risen from extreme poverty and an abusive childhood. According to her nurse in later years, Bow would sometimes talk back to these images, defending herself against decades-old insults as if they were fresh wounds. The psychological significance of Bow's collection becomes clearer in context of her mental health struggles. Diagnosed with schizophrenia in an era of limited psychiatric understanding, Bow's preservation of materials that caused her pain seems paradoxical unless viewed as a form of self-punishment or attempt to maintain control over narratives that had spiraled beyond her influence during her career. As her mental health deteriorated in her final decades, Bow reportedly added new materials to the collection whenever her name appeared in Whatever Happened To, articles, or Hollywood retrospectives. According to her son, she would say, "They're still talking about me, still getting it wrong," as she pasted new clippings alongside yellowing articles from the 1920s. After Bow's death in 1965, her sons discovered dozens of these scrapbooks, far more than they had realized existed, hidden throughout her modest Las Vegas home. Finding them too painful to keep, but recognizing their historical significance, they donated selected volumes to film archives, while destroying those containing the most hurtful content. Bow's collection stands as a heartbreaking testament to fame's psychological cost. A beautiful woman who, in private, surrounded herself with the cruelest versions of her public image, preserving the very narratives that had contributed to her downfall and subsequent mental illness. Number 11. George Reeves, Superman's Kryptonite Collection. I'm tired of being Superman. George Reeves achieved immortality playing Superman on television from 1952 to 1958, but the role that made him famous also trapped him in typecasting that destroyed his serious acting ambitions. According to close friends who spoke after his controversial death in 1959, Reeves maintained a collection that reflected his complex, tortured relationship with the character that both made and ruined him. Jack Larson, who played Jimmy Olsen in the Adventures of Superman series, revealed years after Reeves's death that the actor had maintained what cast members privately called the Superman Shrine, a locked room in his Benedict Canyon home containing Superman memorabilia that Reeves publicly claimed to despise but privately preserved. According to Larson, this collection included studio fan mail, both positive and negative, narrative, with children's adoring letters filed alongside hate mail from viewers who confused actor with character. Reeves reportedly kept every Superman costume he had worn on the show, hanging them in chronological order to show wear patterns and alterations over the series' run. Perhaps most revealing was Reeves's reported collection of newspaper articles and internal studio memos documenting failed attempts to break free from the Superman role. According to his fiancée, Leonore Lemon, Reeves preserved rejection letters for serious roles where producers explicitly cited audience inability to accept Superman in dramatic parts. What made this collection particularly poignant was Reeves's contradictory relationship with it. According to multiple sources, he would privately show the collection to trusted friends after drinking, sometimes expressing pride in Superman's cultural impact, while other times raging against how the role had limited his career. Phyllis Coates, who played Lois Lane in the first season, recalled Reeves showing her the collection and saying, "This is my prison scrapbook." The collection reportedly grew most significantly after the series ended in 1958, when Reeves struggled to find new acting opportunities despite being free from Superman filming obligations. During this period, he allegedly began adding items that reflected his increasingly dark thoughts about the character, including hate mail and news clippings about children who had injured themselves trying to fly like Superman. According to Noel Neill, who played Lois Lane in later seasons, Reeves's relationship with this collection became increasingly unhealthy in his final months. She described visiting his home and finding him intoxicated, wearing a tattered Superman cape over civilian clothes, surrounded by memorabilia and press clippings. This incident reportedly occurred just weeks before his death from a gunshot wound officially ruled suicide. After Reeves's death, this collection became the subject of intense interest from both police investigators and collectors. According to Reeves's friend Fred Crane, several people close to the actor entered his home before police arrived and removed significant portions of the collection, either to protect Reeves' reputation or because of concerns about its potentially damaging psychological implications. What remained of Reeves's Superman collection was reportedly divided among friends and family, with some items eventually making their way to memorabilia auctions. However, those who saw the collection in its complete form maintain that the most revealing and troubling items never reached the public, remaining as mysterious as the circumstances of Reeves's controversial death. These disturbing collections reveal the dark underbelly of Hollywood's golden age, how the pressure of fame, studio control, and public expectation created private torment that often manifested in unusual, sometimes pathological collecting behaviors. From Tallulah Bankhead's shrine of lovers' relics to Howard Hughes's disturbing biological collections, these assemblages offered their creators an illusion of control in lives often controlled by studios, public opinion, and their own carefully constructed images. What connects these diverse collections is how they served as physical manifestations of inner conflict. Clift documenting his own destruction, Swanson contemplating beauty's impermanence through skeletons, or Reeves maintaining a shrine to the very character he resented. These weren't just eccentric celebrity hobbies, but psychological coping mechanisms for people whose public and private selves had dangerously diverged. The next time you watch these icons in classic films, remember the complex, often troubled individuals behind the perfect images. Montgomery Clift photographing his declining beauty, Peter Lorre surrounded by medical curiosities, or Mae West speaking to dolls representing men she once commanded. These private collections reveal the humanity behind the carefully constructed myths of Hollywood's golden age, reminding us that even the most glamorous stars struggled with demons that sometimes took physical form in the things they compulsively gathered around themselves. What surprising collection do you think today's stars might be secretly maintaining? Let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this exploration of Hollywood's hidden obsessions, please hit like, subscribe, and the notification bell to catch our next journey through cinema history.